Here we're at the left of the cemetery. You have to walk down. This is where the Talmud Torah that the children learned. Here it is. Bet HaKevarot Torah. So this is the area where there was a school for children. And this is Emma Banim, Foundation Emma Banim. In 1928, it was an association, and they have a museum over here inside. Maybe we'll go to it a little bit later. I don't know if it's open. This is the Kupa of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So here, to the left of the cemetery, there's the big tzaddikim, the 4th of Elul. He was a rabbi originally in Wazan. And Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan over here is buried over here as well on the 28th of Cheshvan. Then you go over here. Let me just point it out to you. Towards the middle of the Bet HaKevarot, we're going to see Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar. Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar, who was El Kabir, the great Rav. Right next to him, we're going to see is Lala Solika. Lala Solika, together with Bishmuel Elbaz, a student of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Lala Solika Zeshama. Down, if you're going to go towards the left, towards the end of the cemetery, then we're going to get to the Ibn Sur family and the Serrero family. They're towards the end. Rabbi Aaron Botbol, Rav Chaim David Serrero. Up the stairs is Rabbi Vidal Sarfati, and we're going to discuss at length why it's up the stairs. We have down there is actually my grandfather is buried down there, and we have a few other kvarim that we're going to see, but this is basically the layout. So we have the Cave of the Lions to the right. We have Rav Vidal Sarfati on top. We have to the left at the end the Ibn Sur Serrero dynasties. And we have Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar in the middle. In the year Tav Kuf Nun, which is around 1790, they moved the Kvarot. It was originally in the Mela. They moved them over here. And I think it might have been moved even once again. Besides Rabbi Vidal Sarfati, which is that's like towards the end. So let's start. All right. So here we are right at the beginning of the cemetery. Rova Aleph, Carré 1. You make a right, and you're by the Monsenego area, where there was the great lineage of the Monsenego family. Not too many people go here. It's not, you can tell it's a little bit. Okay, this is the Iben Denan. All of the Iben Denans, if you notice, there's a lot of Iben Denans. Here we have the kever of Hanesher Gadol Bal Hanotza. Harav Tzana Rav Kana Chasida Kadisha Prisha Morav Chaim Yehuda HaKohen Zatzal. I was just in a conversation in Eretz Yisrael with a Talmid Chacham in Eretz Yisrael. His name is Rav Netanel Avital, that invests a lot of time in researching Chachamim FES, and he asked me to look particularly for his kever, and I can't believe we found it. And it's written Bal HaNotza. He was known as a tremendous Chasita Prisha, that it said on him that he never spoke Sichat Chulin, he never spoke idle talk in his just like that in his life. Just we'll discuss a little bit. Over here it says Rabbi Chaim Yehuda HaKohen, written in the Sefer in the Sefer of Malchi Rabbanan. We'll just discuss one thing about him. Just put it on pause for a minute. He was niftar in the year 1884. Okay, let us continue. Okay, you can pause it for now. There are the following dynasties in Morocco. There was the Monsenego dynasty, there was the Iben Denan dynasty, the Sarfati dynasty, the Ibn Sur dynasty, and the Serrero dynasty. This is the area of the Monsenegos and Ibn Denans. As you notice, there's a lot of different Ibn Denans, Rabbi Chacham Shalem, Rabbi Moshe Iben Denan. In the year Miftach. These were all great tzaddikim from the lineage of Chachmei Tzfarad. Here we have a woman, the Simcha, the daughter of Eliyahu, the Almanah of Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan, who's one of the great Chachamim of Morocco, Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan. This is his wife's kever. This is the great Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego. I just want to know if it's the same one. Okay, so here we're in the cemetery of FES in the first area, right when you're going into your right. You have Rabbi Rafael Moshe Askuri. That a mikre happened to him and they all had to move. And it's written in the year Tafresh Mem Dalid, which is 1884, La Yetzirah. That's where they had to move all of their kvarim to this area, together with Rabbi Chaim Toledano, Rabbi Aaron Monsenego, Rabbi Avraham Monsenego, and Rabbi Aaron Kohen, who was the head of Rashi Kvarim. And you have next to them over here is Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego, who was niftar on the 5th of Kislev, Mishnat Hu Yishpot Tevel Betzedek, which is Kuf Tzadi Dalet, Tav Kuf Tzadi Dalet, I think. Now, Rabbi Rafael Moshe Skuri, it's written in the Sefer Malchei Rabbanan that he lived, and it was a great Me'ayen Gadol in the Talmud, and the Rabbanim talk about him, great things of Sinai, Oker Harim. He left a lot of Kidvei Yad, and here Malchei Rabbanan writes some chidushim of his. He heard a story that he had a son, Eliyahu, that had a baby and didn't have what to pay for his Seudat Brit Milah. So his father told him, go try to find somewhere to make your money. He went the first day, second, couldn't make any money. On the third day, he met a Gentile, and the Gentile told him, if you want to buy for me, fine. Otherwise, come with me. He brought him to an area where he had golden coins that were called dablon, and he bought them for very cheap. He asked him, do you have any more? He says, if you find me again, yes. If not, forget about it. He goes back to his father. His father tells him, of course you're not going to find them again. Hashem sent you somebody especially to do this miracle that you were going to have enough for the Seudat Brit Milah. There was another time that unfortunately his son was accused of improper behavior, and he knew that his son was an ish kasher and wouldn't do such a thing, and he said that if it happens that he's right, then my son should die that week. Otherwise, the people who started up, they should have something that happens to them. And that week, there was a big plundering inside the Melach, that obviously, because of that accusation, that his son wasn't guilty. So this is the great Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego. I don't know if it's the Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego, the Dvar Emet, but it's all of the family. We're going to discuss a little bit more when we get to Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego, the current one, the most recent one. Okay, we are entering in the area of we'll call it the Gov HaArayot, the cave of the great lions. So there are 5 tzaddikim buried over here. Let's start at the end. Rabbi Meir Yisrael. Rabbi Meir Yisrael. We have a biography that's written of Rabbi Meir Yisrael. Was born in FES in 1885. Devoted himself to opening a yeshiva and to teaching his students. Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego, as I mentioned, buried right next to him, was one of his students. Rabbi Mordechai Halevi, Rabbi Rachamim Halevi, Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan, Rabbi Moshe Mi'ara. They were all Talmidim of his. He sat on the bedding together with Rav Chaim David Serrero and Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego. So he was known as a great, humble, and tremendous Talmid Chacham that had a yeshiva. There's actually a Rav that I'm in touch with till today that learned in his yeshiva. He was niftar in the year 1971 at the age of 86. Okay. The next kever over here is Rabbi Eliyahu Iben Denan, also from the lineage of the great Iben Denan family. He was the son of the great tzaddik Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan, Hamelech Shlomo. Rabbi Eliyahu Iben Denan is buried over here next to his father. This is his father, the great Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan, the Bala Mechaber Sfarim Asher Shlomo and Bakesh Shlomo. Very deep and important Sfarim on the Psakim of Choshen Mishpat Even Ezer. Some of the Klalei Psak, some of the rules of how we decide halacha and what were the traditions that we followed are written and recorded in his Sfarim. For example, he writes how we follow Maran in what's written in the Shulchan Aruch and in the Bet Yosef, not in what's written in the Bedek HaBayit and in the Afkat Rochel all the time. But he also was known for his tremendous leadership and being the chief rabbi of Morocco in the early 1920s, together with Rabbi Rafael and Kawa, as we mentioned beforehand. His at an early age already, he was known to be proficient in the works of Kabbalah and in all other writings. We have a special recording on his life. You could listen over there. So this is Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan, and next to him is his son Rabbi Eliyahu on his left, and on his right is Rabbi Moshe Ben Denan, his other son. So he has his 2 sons next to him, who was on the Beddin in Fez in Morocco and was niftar in 1944 at the age of 65, at a young age. And here we have Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego, who was niftar, as I mentioned, in 1994. I said 84, I'm sorry, I meant 1994. And he became the chief rabbi of Morocco when Rabbi Shalom Besas went to Eretz Yisrael to be the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim in 1975. Rabbi Yedidya Monsenego took over. Rabbi Yedidya wrote a few Sfarim, one of them called Pe'at Yam, another one written Pirchei Shoshanim. There he discusses different teshuvot that came to him. For example, Bima being in the middle. He discusses using a microphone for Kriyat HaMegillah. If I'm not mistaken, there he quotes Rav Moshe Feinstein and other works. He was a Rav beforehand in the city of Wazan, and was very close. Also, he was close to Baba Sali. They were very, very close friends and obviously colleagues. He was in Beddin Fez. Rabbi Baba Sali was Dayan in the south of Morocco, and he was known to have tremendous nobility. He was close to the king, of course, being the chief rabbi in that position. It says over here on his kever, Rav Pe'alim la Torah v'la Teodah adin nefesh v'zachar ha'ayon. Very refined and clear, and great nobility. Charif ubaki, sharp and proficient. Mishnato kav v'naki, and everything was clear by him. He was the western candle from the leftover of all the generations of great rabbanim. He was at the end of the line the Dayan Umore Sabad Mishpatim. He was a Dayan and the master of monetary laws for more than 50 years. He was the Rav in Fez, and eventually chief rabbi of Morocco. As we mentioned, he was niftar at 88 years old on the 4th of Elul. This is the kever of my grandfather. פה בין רגבי עפר ועפר חוצף קבר לגביית איש חמודות בעל מידות טובות שפל ברך ועניו מאושר בנייניו חברת גומלי חסדים רבי רפאל רימוך, the son of Rabbi Yaakov Rimoch, niftar at 58 years old on Friday the 19th of Iyar Tavshin Yudchet, which is 1968. Now, the story that goes on in the family is that he was deathly ill, if I'm not mistaken, for 20 years beforehand, and as a young man, he already had six children at the time. He had nine children, and the Chevra Kadisha all came to him, and they said Kriyat Shema, and it was like basically over. And out of nowhere, he got up, and they started singing. He started singing Orech Yamim Ushnot Chaim Yosifu Lach. And from there, afterwards, he had my aunt Rachel Hassan, my aunt Anita Glazer, and my mother. And so another wouldn't be here till today. It wasn't that miracle that he got up and he almost like a Tchiyat HaMetim. He was a very refined person, a person of great midot, as it's written over here. And the Rimoch family in general was known from already Gerush Sfarad. I have a sefer at home from Rabbi Avram Rimoch, who wrote a Perush on Tehillim. And there's already in Spain. There's also Rabbi Chaim Rimoch, which was signed on one of the documents of the great machloket in the 1500s between the Megurashim and the Toshavim here in the city of Fez, when there was a machloket whether they should keep the takana of the Toshavim, which is that when there's a piercing where there's an adhesion in the lung, are you allowed to check to see if there's really a piercing in the lung or not? The Toshavim always held it was tarif, and the Megurashim had a tradition to allow such a thing if it was a piercing against the wall, like the Shita of Rabbeinu Tam, which was more lenient, and you'd be able to eat more meat that way. There was such a big machloket. They went up to the king. Rav Chaim Gagin wrote a whole sefer called Etz HaChaim, and there signed in the document of the Toshavim was Rabbi Chaim Rimoch. It was obviously from Spain originally, but they were here even before the Megurashim came. They were always community leaders, and they were always involved in being heads of the community. And there's a Rimoch family in Los Angeles. There's a Rimoch family in Montreal. That's my mother's maiden name. And he together with all of his children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, many of them who are following Derech HaTorah ve'Yirah, Yeh Nishmatos Rabbi Tzur Chaim. טוב שם משם טוב, יום אבן רב טוב סבזר ונשמור, את אלמינם נשמתיו שמור, יעלו זכרם כבוד, ינון משכבותם, מנוחה נכונה בשבעת נעלת קדושים ותוארים, מזכירים את נשמת מור סבי, רבי רפאל, בן רבי יעקב רימוך, שנפטר לבית העולמו, רוח אדוני תניחנו בגן עדן. Of my dear cousin, Eliyahu Devico, passed away in 2022, and much older than me, obviously. He taught me how to drive when I was like 13 years old in the streets of Fez. And he has an amazing story, because when we visited Morocco in 2017, the Bet HaKevarot didn't look this nice. It was a disaster. It looked very old. And Eli was one of the few Jews still living in Fez at the time. And he dedicated himself from that point on. He was started beforehand, but from that point on, he dedicated himself to fixing the Bet HaKevarot of FES, and he discovered a lot of tombs that were random, and we were able to restore some of them. We'll say the story of a few of them coming up soon. And I mentioned to him, he would sit over here yelling at the employees every day, making sure that they do their job. And I told him, this is a big zichut, and even though he was suffering from lung cancer at the time, I told him, Eli, the longer you're working on this is the zichut that's keeping you alive. He kept on going, and I got a phone call from him in February inviting me to the inauguration, that he finally finished restoring the cemetery. And in my heart, I was a little sad, because I knew that was the zichut that was keeping him alive. And indeed, a few months later, he in Nisan, the 17th of Nisan, in Pesach, he passed away. I got that call. I was in Eretz Yisrael at the time. He passed away. But you could maybe post a video of him actually talking about this, the tzaddikim in the cemetery, and him knowing that he had a big zichut. So he really has a big zichut for a lot of the tzaddikim that were upkept over here. And Yinishmato Shor Chaim, Shem Tov Yom Avim Merachem Mesheisha Kasher Eliyahu Yehudah Devico.
Je suis né à Fès en 1945 et j'ai vécu à Fès toute ma vie.
So as a continuation, as one of the kvarim that was discovered by Eliyahu Devico, but that was neglected, was Rabbi Yaakov Kenizal. This is the kever of Rabbi Yaakov Kenizal, who passed away in the year 1613. 1613. So that means he was the second generation from the Migurashim, from those who were exiled out of Spain in 1492. And his bones were transferred over here in the year 1884. That was the transferring of the bones. I want to discuss a little bit of Rabbi Yaakov Kenizal. Rabbi Yosef Ben Naim, the Sefer Malchei Rabbanan, who's also buried around here. He writes the following about Rabbi Yaakov Kenizal. He writes that his tremendous chokhmah and wisdom, when the Or HaChaim HaKadosh had a yeshiva over here in Fez, there was a famine, and Rabbi Shmuel Elbaz was here, who was buried right over here, but right next to Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar. And what they were trying to find was praying that the rain should stop. So at that time, the yeshiva went to the kever of Rabbi Yaakov Kenizal. You can imagine, they all came and they prayed together. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Shmuel Elbaz, all of them together at his kever. He's known for a perush that he has, an explanation on Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi, who is a perush on Rashi. In the Siftei Chachamim on the side, you'll see the Re'em, Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi. Interestingly enough, I once found in the Gnizah, in that synagogue, a very old copy of the Re'em of Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi. It was Kimat Rishon, and he has a perush on it. Recently, there was an edition of Chumash Rashi that from the city of Petach Tikva somebody put out with 11 explanations on Rashi, and one of his perushim is Rav Yaakov Kenizal that is printed over there. It's a very deep explanation, and he writes that he is, when they moved the kever in 1884, it was moved next to the Atzamot, next to Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar, as we see over here. He wasn't sure if his name is Rabbi Yaakov Keni Zichrono Livracha or Kenizal, all as one name. But I think the summary and the conclusion is that it is considered all one name. It's written over here that on the 5th of on Rav Eliyahu Mansano writes that in the year Tav Tzadi Zayin, which is 1837, on the 11th of Adar, which was Ta'anit Esther. After the tefillah, they went to the Bet HaKevarot of the Chacham Rabbi Yaakov Kenizal. They read Eicha, Zechor Maya Lanu. Rabbi Shalom Ederi got up and spoke, and he asked Hakadosh Baruch Hu for Rachbanut, why they're having a drought. They all went barefoot to the Bet HaKnesset. They sat at the beginning of the Bet HaKnesset, over the other side of the wall. That there was Chasadim and Chachamim that were buried over there. Among them, Rabbi Yaakov Kenizal. And that's where they prayed. So it was a makom of tefillah, not only by the Yeshiva of Or HaChaim HaKadosh. It seems to be throughout generations, this was a tremendous place of tefillah. You could imagine the Or HaChaim HaKadosh and over here Rabbi Shalom Ederi and Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan also writes this way they did slichot by his kever. Okay. Okay, so we're here by the kever of Rabbi Yehudah Ibn Attar El Kbir. Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar, if you notice, very prominent kever over here. Unfortunately, this kever had to be moved 3 times. He was born in the year Tav Tet Vav, which is in 1655, and that was the month that Rabbi Shaul Serero passed away. Right over there, that's right. Rabbi Shaul Serero passed away, and it was niftar on Yutet Sivan in the year 1733. In the year 1733. Now, it's written in the Sefer Et Likol Chefetz of Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur, which we're going to visit as kevers to the left at the end of the cemetery. Kinot, eulogies that they wrote especially about Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar. He was the big Baki, the big Gadol Ador we call him. He was the great Rav of the generation at the time that they called him El Kbir, the great one. Although he wasn't related to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the story does go that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh came to FES and he asked for Askama. At the time, it's not clear if he met the Or HaChaim HaKadosh or not, or whether he only met Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur. I said that story another time. But one thing I will say is that in the year Tav Samech Aleph, in the year 1701, he was in Miknes because of different redifot, different persecutions that were happening at the time in Fez at the time. So he went to Miknes, and at that time he was together with Rabbi Moshe Toledano, Rabbi Habib Toledano, and he's signed on certain Piskedinim at that time. He was together with Rabbi Shmuel Sarfati, and he came back to Fez the next year. The Rabbanim that were with him on the Beddin was Rabbi Menachem Serero, and other Rabbanim at the time. He wrote a sefer called Mishpat Uzdaka B'Yaakov, 2 volumes. It's a sefer of Yaakov Ibn Sur that have a lot of his Piskei Dinim. They just came out a special Shirot Utshuvot of him, of Gur Yehuda Aryeh Yehuda. He was known as a lion. As a matter of fact, Rabbi Yosef Ben Naim writes that in one time there was a Rav who started writing Piskei Dinim, and he wrote a question on Rabbi Yehudah Ibn Attar that he didn't agree to what he said. Right away appeared in front of him a lion. He didn't know why this lion appeared in front of him until later he realized it was Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar. The lion didn't hurt him, but it was a reminder of his greatness, that people would come to his kever and pray. Not only then, but there was a disagreement between Jews and non-Jews. They would go to his kever and they would swear in his name. There's a story I said once beforehand about what happened one time when there was a big machloket between them. So between a Jew and a Goy, and the Jew actually lied and he died at that time, and the non-Jew went back and he thought everything was okay, but then he brought all his wealth to Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar. Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar refused to take money from the community. He actually had his own business of jewelry and different gold bracelets, that till today there are people who have gold bracelets that they are known that Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar made. So the kever, it says over here, it had to move in the year Taf Kuf Nun Bet, which is in the year 1792, and again in 1884. The Chida writes about Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar that he fell once in a lion's den, and he was there all night and not all day, and they did not harm him. The Chida writes it as well in Marechet HaGdolim that he heard from one Rav that he was a pure Solet Nikiya, and how many miracles happened with him. This was Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar, once again, his students. It was the golden era, and he was known as the Gaon of the golden era, with Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur and with Rabbi Mattatya Serero, Menachem Serero, others that were signed on that takana. The earliest takana that we know about not eating rice in our communities is a teshuvah that's written in his sefer, that we stayed away from rice, not because of Rav Yochanan Ben Nuri that says that rice is like chametz, rather because it was mixed in with other things. There's a lot of other piskei dinim. This is the short life of Rabbi Yaakov of Rabbi Yehuda Ibn Sur. They say that he saw Eliyahu Navim, not only him, even his servant, Eliyahu Ben Attar, even his servant, Misharetet Shelo, saw Eliyahu Navi. Chazaku Baruch. All right, here we're at the section of the Bet HaKevarot in FES that they had to, as we mentioned, they had to bring the bones already. They had to move them from place to place. If you could take just a picture up here, that's where Rabbi Vidal Sarfati is buried. And I heard from my cousin, that we mentioned, who was buried over here, that according to their tradition that they had, is that when they tried to move the bones of Rabbi Vidal Sarfati, it started shaking. The earth started becoming earthquakes and thunder every time they tried to move it. So all the other kvarim they were not able to move, but this one they stopped over there, and it stayed in that place. So here, besides the La Sulika, we're going to get to that in a moment. We have Rabbi Vidal Sarfati, he's the second, I believe, in the third, probably the third. The third, I'm not sure which one. There's a few. This is Rabbi Vidal Sarfati, and Rabbi Avner Sarfati is next to him. Now, if you take a look, there's Rabbi Eliyahu Sarfati who wrote Shelot Utshuvot. They just, let's go over here. They recently published the Sfarim of Rabbi Eliyahu Sarfati, student of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. He was a Rosh Bedin in Fez for 55 years. And they attribute the Sarfati family, if you go back 18 generations, to Rabbeinu Tam. That's why it's called Sarfati. The Rabbeinu Tam was the grandson of Rashi, of course. And he was niftar in 1805. Once again, they had to move his kever, unfortunately. And this is, he was buried over here, as I mentioned. There was the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel Elbaz, who was buried not far away from over here, was the Rosh Yeshiva at the time of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And once again, this is Lala Solika that we've spoken about in the past, Be'arichut, at length, about her story, that she was originally from the north of Morocco, and they brought her over here in prison for a few years until they eventually executed her for false accusations. And there's many miracles that people go till today. They pray on her kever, and she is a dugma of tzniut and of a Bat Yisrael that had to go through tremendous sufferings. So that is the section number 51. Chazaku Baruch. So you have to go down the stairs, the Ibn Sur section. So it's all the way at the end of the cemetery. Wow. Okay. The most left-hand side of the cemetery. Tell me when we're recording. So here is the section of the Ibn Sur. As I mentioned, one of the dynasties of the Fez Rabbanim was the Ibn Sur family. the beginning was the Ya'avetz, Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur. There's the Ya'avetz Ashkenazi, which is Rabbi Yaakov Emden, and the Ya'avetz Sfaradi, we call him Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur. Once again, Shirot U'Tshuvot Mishpat U'Tzedakah B'Yaakov. He's the one who writes the famous statement in Chelek Bet, Siman Hey, that before the light of Maran came upon, the light of Rav Yosef Karo, we would follow the Rosh. Efo Rosh Nifneh Sham Nelech. But once Shezarach Oro Shel Maran, once the light of Maran came upon, Alachnu Acharav Afilu Keneged Elef Poskim. In many of the approbations of Rav Ovadia Yosef, he's quoting Mishpat U'Tzedakah B'Yaakov. He's quoting this Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur. Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur, Ha'adam Gadol Ba'anakim, he had many generations of children. One of them was Rabbi Shlomo Eliyahu. One of them was Rabbi Shlomo Shemuel Ibn Sur. I don't know where he is buried. Rabbi Shlomo Shemuel Ibn Sur. The reason why he's named the Mishpat Zekav had a son called Rabbi Rafael Obed Ibn Sur. Rabbi Rafael Obed Ibn Sur, the name is named Oved, is because Oved is just like a Yibama. In the case of Obed, here was his son, right over here, the son of Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur. And he had a child called Rabbi Shlomo Shemuel, because according to historical research that we have done, he was married to the daughter of Rabbi Shmuel di Abila. That means his mother-in-law was the sister of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur had Rabbi Shlomo Shemuel Ibn Sur, who in turn had after him, let me just see if I can find, if I jotted this down, who in turn had Rabbi. So he had his son Rabbi Shlomo Eliyahu Ibn Sur, Rabbi Shlomo Shmuel Ibn Sur. Then his daughter married Rav Atiyah, who also had a daughter who was married to Rabbi Moshe Botbol. This Rabbi Moshe Botbol was the patriarch of the Botbol family, the father of Rabbi Aaron Botbol, which is buried right over here, which we'll get to in a moment. Rabbi Moshe Botbol had as great son-in-laws. He had one of his son-in-law, Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Sur the second, Rabbi Ya'avetz Hasheni, Rabbi Shlomo Eliyahu Ibn Sur, that was the son-in-law of this Rabbi Moshe Botbol, Rabbi Yonatan ben Zimra, and Rabbi Moshe Iben Denan. Now they say he also had a son called Rabbi Aaron Botbol Harishon. Rabbi Aaron Botbol Harishon. They say on him that he was Mara de Kula Talmuda. They say great expressions on him, that he was a Mayana Midgaber. That means Michadesh a lot of Chidushe Torah. Him together, Rabbi Avram Mansano at the time. Rabbi Aaron Botbol had a son. He had a son who was named Rabbi Avram Botbol. Rabbi Avram had Rabbi Aaron Botbol, who was the uncle of my grandmother. So that's how it comes down. So it's like 9 generations, around 9 generations, and this is the Ya'avetz generation. He's known for many piyutim, the Ya'avetz that he wrote. One of the piyutim that he wrote, we actually say in the Tikkun Tal about Elisha. It's added on about Tikkun Geshem about Elisha, and about one more stanza that is written, an extra stanza that Klal Yisrael says it's attributed to the Ya'avetz. He wrote many kinot printed in the Sefer Et Lekol Chefetz. He wrote a special Sefer of kinot Et Lekol Chefetz. Rabbi Rafael, he had his son Rabbi Rafael Oved Ibn Sur, as I mentioned, was a great chacham as well. We are embarking on a project, Machon Magen Avot, to print the Sfarim of Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur, who was, I think it's the one who was niftar, the one over here who wrote, I think this is Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur, who wrote the Sefer Simchat Olam on Even HaEzer, which is about Inyane of Even HaEzer, about women halachot, because somebody who's not married, he doesn't have simcha yet, right? So that's why he wrote that those ktavim. We have them in manuscript, and B'ezrat Hashem, we hope that they get printed. These are the great chachamim that are over here. This is the great Rabbi Matatyahu Serero from the Serero dynasty. It's one of the great dynasties as well. We have, not far away, is Rabbi Chaim David Serero, that we had the zichut of publishing his works. He was the Dayan in the previous generation. We'll see if we find it over there. But let's first get to Rabbi Aaron Botbol. Here, I think I mentioned the story in the past. Rabbi Aaron Botbol, when he was an infant, he was deathly ill. At the time, it was rumored that Rav Yaakov Abuchatzera was traveling through the city of Fez. And the mother heard of this, because he didn't want anybody to know. She went to Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzera's house. She started knocking on the door. Nobody answered. But when a mother has her child that is deathly ill, she will not stop at anything. So she banged down on the door until Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzera opened up. And she said, here's my infant, and he's deathly ill. There was a plague at the time. Rabbi Yaakov gave her a bracha, and he said he should live a long life. And therefore, this is Rabbi Aaron Botbol that grew up to be a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Not only that he was also of great wealth, because the whole Botbol family had tremendous wealth beforehand. And he participated in the publishing of the Sfarim of Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzera. There's letters between Baba Sali and Rabbi Aaron Botbol on the printing of the Sfarim of Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzera. So it's a full circle. How Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzera gave him a bracha that he should live his life, and he was able to help with the printing of the Sfarim of Rabbi Yaakov. So it's unbelievable, full circle. We have a famous picture in the family of Rabbi Aaron Botbol holding a Sefer Torah and doing a bar mitzvah for orphans. He would support them, do a bar mitzvah for orphans, and he was on the Bedin together with Rabbi Vidal Sarfati Ha'acharon, together with Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan, the chief rabbi until he had to become the chief rabbi of Morocco. He was there in the Bedin, together with his brother-in-law, Rav Matatyahu Serero was his brother-in-law, as well as Rabbi Avner Sarfati, which, if I'm not mistaken, no, that's the I think he was connected as well, but he's also his brother-in-law. If I'm not mistaken, also his brother-in-law. So they were all family. This was the Rabbi Aaron Botbol, the great Dayan in Morocco, that was niftar in the year Tavshin Zayin 1947 on Hey Tishrei. Well, that's a. Here is the Kvarim, as we mentioned, of some more Ibn Surs, Rabbi Yaakov ben Rabbi Shlomo Eliyahu Ibn Sur, Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur ben Rabbi Shlomo Ibn Sur, all great Chachamim. This is the Rav Rafael Ibn Sur, is a great community leader, wrote glosses at the side of Bet Oved, Bet Menucha, that I quote many times in Magen Avot. Avat Shalom put it out recently, some of his Kidvei Yad. Here, this whole line is unbelievable, tremendous line. One big kever of the Serero. Of the Serero family. The beginning of the Serero family is Rabbi Shaul Serero. I don't know if this is the one when it says, look, zone in over here. Matzevat for Rabbi Shaul Serero. He was in the 1600s, a few generations after the Girush Sfarad. He had children of Matatyahu Serero, Rav Menachem Serero. Here also is the Ibn Sur family, Shlomo Eliyahu Ibn Sur. So the Serero family, they were great tzaddikim and Talmid Chachamim, one after the other. Here's Rabbi Chaim David Serero Harishon, Rabbi Chaim David Serero, another one. Then you have Rabbi Yehuda Serero. These are all great, tremendous tzaddikim. Many of them wrote tremendous sfarim and tremendous scholarship. Rabbi Emmanuel Serero. Here on the side of the kever, you have. I don't know why it's missing. We wrote up a whole thing. It should be here. I don't know why we have to replace this. About the history of all of these, of the Serero family. Rav Yoshua Serero, Rav Reuven Serero, Rav Menachem Serero, Rabbi Nachman Serero, Rabbi Reuven Serero, unbelievable. And it's a kever that from the whole family that they were generation after generation of great dayanim, and their piskei dinim are brought in many places. We were zochet to print the kever of the writings of Rabbi Chaim David Serero that's printed over there. That's buried over there. We're going to go to his kever now. Serero, president de la tribunal. That means he was on the bedin. He started his career in Mogador, in Marrakesh, actually in Mogador, and in Fez. Niftar in the year 1967. So he was married to the daughter. His mother was the sister of Rabbi Aaron Botbol. And so that means he was first cousins with my grandmother. And Rabbi Chaim David Serero had a tremendous influence on a lot of the takanot that were happening in the world of the rabbinics during the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. One story I will tell you that I mentioned this beforehand, I mentioned this to Rabbi Ben Shushan and others, is that Rabbi Chaim David Serero was on the bedin together with Rabbi Chaim David Ben Shushan. At that time, Rav Chaim Pinto was niftar in Mogador. So his son Rabbi Moshe Aaron Pinto was the father of Rabbi David Pinto. Shlita, he was left as a yatom, and he went to the bedin of Mogador that they should write a letter if he needed support. I don't know if he ever used that letter, but they wrote him a letter of support. Fast forward in the year 2012 or 13, I procured the manuscript of Rabbi Chaim David Serero through Rabbi Aaron Botbol alav shalom, and I was working on the Ktavim. I was then the Rosh Kollel of Yismach Moshe, which was named for Rabbi Moshe Aaron Pinto, from Rabbi David Pinto's father, Shlita in Toronto. And there I was giving a shiur, as I mentioned, and I was learning with the tzibur the works of Rabbi Chaim David Serero. Together, one of the people that was learning with me was a grandson of Rabbi Chaim David Ben Shushan, the great-grandfather of Rabbi Ari Ben Shushan, that's with us in Los Angeles. And it was an amazing, again, circle of the full story, like we said, by Rabbi Aaron Botbol. Here at the beginning, Rabbi Chaim David Serero, Rabbi Chaim Ben Shushan were positioned to be able to help out Rabbi Moshe Aaron Pinto. Again, I don't know if he used that letter, but they were there for whatever they were able to help with. And in the generations that he needed his Ktavim to be put out, or the Ben Shushan grandchildren that needed to learn Torah were learning under an institution that was named for him, for Rabbi Moshe Aaron Pinto. It's an amazing story. Rabbi Chaim David Serero buried his father, Rabbi Matatyahu Serero, that passed away in 1939. Was born in 1860, and he was also the brother-in-law of Rabbi Aaron Botbol, where he visited not long ago. Rabbi Aaron Botbol's father is over here, Rabbi Avraham Botbol. Rabbi Avraham Botbol, I'm almost sure it's his father. And so this is the whole section of the Botbol and the Serero family. Once again, it's section number 21 in the Bet HaKevarot in Fez. To the left, to the bottom, you go down the stairs and you go to the left. That's where you're going to find these kvarim. And Rabbi Aaron Abba Serero, also a great tzaddik, was niftar in 1934. In 1934. No, in 1934, yes. I have a battery charger. This is Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur, one of the early Ibn Surs. There's a special monument and mausoleum for here over here. It's locked. The Fez, where they used to wash the bodies before the funeral. And over here is the kever of the great Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Chaim HaKohen. Just a few words on Rabbi Chaim HaKohen. He was one of the Rabbanim of Fez, appointed on Motzei Chag HaSukkot in the year 18 92. He was originally from the city of Dobdo, Ira Kohanim, and he passed away in the year Tafkuv Tzadivav. Over here they have it as 1925. Now, Rabbi Shlomo Iben Denan, where we visited beforehand, the great Hamelech Rav Shlomo was was Doresh by his Levaya, and he spoke about things that are me'oreret halev, that aroused the people. And it's written that he was a great Rosh Yeshiva at the time. He writes, just to speak a little bit about him, what greatness there was. Rav Yosef Benaim, who is buried not far away, writes that he was told by one of the Ibn Sors that his house was close to the cemetery, and there were windows that were looking over the cemetery. On Thursday night, where he was niftar, his children and his wife saw on his kever a plate that there was fire coming out of it. They were so afraid. Nobody put the fire over there. They went out and they saw indeed that there was a candle burning on the kever, and it wouldn't move at all despite the different winds. And it was there just like a plate. As a matter of fact, the day when he was niftar, the Rabbanim said that nobody should open up their store, and one person actually did want to sell a little bit of oil. He went out and he saw that his whole flask of oil, he went out to sell flour actually. When he went out, all of the oil that was there in the jug just spilled out. This is the great Rabbi Chaim HaKohen. The last 24 years of his life, he wasn't able to learn because he was blinded. He learned together with the Bnei Yeshiva off by heart, and he had a lot of sufferings at the end of his life. So this is the great Rabbi Chaim HaKohen, who didn't leave behind Sfarim that I know of, at least. But he was a tremendous Marbitz Torah, a great monument they have over here. Adoneinu Rabbeinu Ater Doshenu Rabbi Chaim HaKohen. The kever of Rabbi Vidal Sarfati, overlooking the whole cemetery of FES. Once again, Rabbi Yehudah Ben Attar, Rav Yaakov Kenizal, where the fire is burning. My grandfather is buried over there to the right. You have the Monsenegos and the Iben Denans that way. You have the other way, Rabbi Rafael Ben Sur, Rav Yaakov Ben Sur, the Ya'avetz, Shmuel Elbaz right in front of us. And here, when we went up the stairs, you have Rabbi Vidal Sarfati. Rabbi Vidal Sarfati was the Dayan there was many Rabbi Vidal Sarfatis. Here, they are discussing the author of the Tzuf Dvash, Imre Yosher, and although Rav Benaim writes in his Malchei Rabbanan that although a lot of Moroccan Rabbanim, we didn't have their writings published because of a lack of publishing houses, but he writes that Rabbi Vidal Sarfati was zoche that his works did get all around, and they are quoted all over. He has a kuntres on Re'em Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi. He has a perush on the Sifra, Megillat Setarim on Megillat Esther, Hatzat Rut on Megillat Rut, the perush al Megillat Echa, which is still not, they say Ktav Yad, a perush on Tehillim. He passed away very early on a long time ago in the year Shin Ayin Tet, which is the year 1609. That's how long. It's a long time ago that he was the second generation after the Megurashim. Here is his kever over here that he was the Rav Gadol, that at his time he petitioned that there should be that the people should be choser b'tshuva when there was a drought. And there's the whole lineage of the family tree going. It traces it's all the way up to Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, all the way up to Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi. I'll take a video of that. And whoever is buried over here are the tzaddikim that learned Torah from Rabbi Vidal Sarfati. This is the great author of the Suf Dvash.